I'm your host, Martin Perdomo, and this is your ultimate guide to understanding what it truly means to be wealthy AF. And today I'm joined by Mark Buher, and Mark is a former infantryman intelligence professional and a licensed attorney who has conducted intelligence and security operations around the world. We're going to have hopefully he has some really cool, interesting stories to share with us. He has trained units from Departments of Defense and the Department of Justice, the Fortune 500 companies, police officers from over 60 departments from around the country. He is a coordinator of the Counter-Terrorist magazine and the host of the PearlSnap Tactical podcast. Thank you, Mark, for being here today, and I'm really excited to hear what you have to say. Today, we're going to talk about gun control, a very controversial subject in the U.S. here, where many of us love our guns, me being one of them. I live in the great state of Pennsylvania. I have a carrier's permit and own multiple weapons and love my guns because that's what the founding fathers of our country gave us as a means to overthrow the government. Mark, thank you. I know that my introduction doesn't do us much justice. Tell us a little bit more about yourself, brother.
Oh man, thanks for having me on. I'm looking forward to hanging out and talking a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I think you covered it up. Like I said before, I think if we go any longer on my bio, they'll probably just fall asleep. So I mean, I think you did a pretty thorough job.
Thank you, brother. Thank you. I want to start with the first question is, what is your stand on gun control in America?
Well, I mean, I'm against it. I think that we have a very, we're in a unique position, unique history with regards to guns. And I think that if you compare us to even other Western nations, I mean, even like Britain, France, Germany, Australia, even though they're on the other side of the, but they're still kind of a westernized nation. If you compare the kind of freedoms that we have in terms of speech, association, and on down the list, you'll think that we're all the same, but we're not. We have far more freedoms than even they do on what we can say, what we can post, and everything like that. And the only reason why that is true is because we have an armed citizenry. I mean, other than that, you can't make the argument otherwise. There's nothing else would account for that. Because if you say, well, no, it's because of our laws, that allow that. Well, I mean, who enforces the laws? People with guns, right? So what is the only counterbalance to an abuse by that? I mean, we could even see in our country right now, there's certain laws that we have on the books that are there for the safety and security of our country that are simply not being enforced, right? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, in the end, the law is only a words on a paper. It takes enforcement, to effectuate those laws. And the only thing that keeps those laws is force, right? Either the government enacting force or the threat of the citizenry to enact force or to counter the force from the government. I mean, that's all it is. I mean, I've never heard a cogent argument to the contrary.
How are we different from France and Germany, as it pertains to this subject? You said, we have more, we're different, right, to those Western nations because of our...
Yeah, sure.
I mean, an example of what you mean by how we're different and we're,
Yeah, I mean, and of course, this is, I don't know the ins and outs of their laws, but this is just from reports of people that I've followed and stories that I've read. So, it's only as accurate as the reporting that I've read. But for instance, in Britain, my understanding is that, there's certain things that you can't post online. And if you do, you can be arrested for that. That I believe, based on what I've read on reports, that people have been arrested simply for things that they've posted online, things that you would not have gotten arrested for here, right? If you look at and things in the lockdowns, like back in the 2020, 2021, you could even see, well, first of all, like in Australia, I mean, they were literally keeping people under house arrest Again, just based on the reports that I read. I mean, you were not allowed to basically come out of your house almost. And, correspondingly, those people have surrendered their guns. It's very hard to have a gun, to own or to possess one. You could even compare the limits or the types of lockdowns that happened here in this country. You could see that the more the states that had more restrictive lockdowns, interestingly enough, had tighter gun laws. And I think those are somewhat related. I don't think it's just a coincidence that that's true. But
so, what do you see America and the media heading down in that direction as they have done in Britain, as it pertains to gun control and freedom of speech? Because we're talking about freedom of speech when you say that they've been arrested for saying certain things, and I'm going to go there, so I'm going to get a little political here. So right now we're experiencing where we have our ex-president Donald Trump, where they took him off the ballot in Colorado, right?
Or they tried to,
or they're trying to, yeah. Colorado, and I think it was Maine, the other one, the other state, I'm not sure. And so the media has a big impact on that, and the powers that be have a big impact on that. Do you see a correlation of the media doing the same things here that they're doing?
Well, yeah, I mean, you definitely do. I mean, just look at any time there's an active shooter event, statistically it's done with a handgun. And I mean, before the bodies are even cold, the media is ushering people out, talking heads, politicians or whatever, talking about banning 30-round capacity magazines and AR-15s. Like, why? Why would you do that? Why would you take something that's not even involved or implicated in the attack, and why would that be your first push?
Why do they do that? Why do you think that they do that?
I mean, I could only speculate. I wouldn't know. I don't know why they do that. I mean, to speculate it, it's the folks there's certain folks that have, well, everybody, it doesn't matter what side of your aisle that you're on, everyone has an agenda. Everyone has goals and objectives and directions that they would like to see the country go. And there's a certain segment of the population and those in power that want to see the populace disarmed. That it's easier to control, right? If you can control that, you control their speech, their freedom of association. I mean, you control all kinds of things.
Tell us, you being an intelligence officer, being an ex-intelligence officer.
Well, I wasn't an officer, but I was in the intel field. I was in
intel field.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. So, from your perspective, what would happen to a nation that doesn't have the right to bear arms? What would happen to America if we didn't reserve that right? If our founding fathers did not put that in the great Constitution that we have?
Well, I think there's all kinds of ways that it could go, and what I would see it kind of devolving into is just something closer to what is happening in Europe, in Western Europe. It's just it's like the long night, it's just slowly sliding down the hill where your freedoms are constantly eroded. And then when you decide to speak up, when you decide to protest, then you can be shut down. You can be easily dispersed, and you can be easily controlled and manipulated. So I think that's usually I say, hey man, if you want to see which way we're going, just look at Europe and then add 5 years to it, and that's what we're going to look like. And I said that years ago when we were doing terrorism training and looking at at trends in terrorist attacks. You could look at the Middle East. A few years later, you'd see those attacks going on in Europe, and then I say, give it 5 years, boom, we're going to start seeing vehicle-borne IDs. You're going to see people starting to run people over with vehicles and stuff like that, because that's what they do in the Middle East. That's what they were doing in Europe. And then sure enough, within that time frame, we started seeing that here, back in 2016, 2017. back when all the ISIS stuff was going on and was more topic of discussion, in the news. But yeah, I mean, that's one way that it could go, if we didn't have it. Or you could devolve full totalitarian state, like China did, like Nazi Germany did, like Russia back in the Stalin era. I mean, there's several different ways that it could go. It could be a hybrid of that. It could be but it's not going to be good. I mean, you're not going to have more freedom. You're not going to have more freedom to associate, to say what you want, to gather with who you want. But I mean, really, that's only one way to erode your freedoms. I mean, we're already kind of drifting to what some people would call a soft totalitarian state, where people are already they're self-censoring. They're already, through propaganda, manipulation, driving their ideology down, that people are already complying and self-abdicating their own freedoms, self-censoring, deciding not to post stuff. You already see that all the time.
Give
so
me an example of that.
Well, I mean, there's just there are things in the news, right, that I've already heard people that that's not politically correct. They're not going to post certain things on their Facebook because they're scared of how that's going to affect their job.
Getting canceled, etc.
Yeah, getting canceled. So that's for people who are kind of in the space that make money, having platforms and stuff like that. But even your average citizen is scared to post things because of what it may, to express his or her opinion, because how that might affect their job. Right? Some people find out about it. They blast, oh, you're not saying the thing that you're supposed to say. Right. And so they, the immediate thing that they do is label you some kind of bigot or some kind of, hateful or racist or whatever it is, that they start throwing these labels on you. And then all of a sudden it's, we can't have that here in the workplace. And there you go. So you see that already.
How do you manage and navigate? What do you tell the people that say that people that want to own guns and they're gun lovers are? I've heard an expression years ago: Bible thumper, gun loving, blah blah blah. Here in Pennsylvania, right? I'm up here in the woods in Pennsylvania. Bible thumping, gun loving, blah 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 blah. What do you say to those people that make those kinds of statements and want to take guns off of take away the regular Americans' guns? What's your message to those people that say guns kill people, guns kill innocent children, guns do this, guns are bad, what's your message to them?
Well, so there's several things, let's just kind of break it down. I mean, the first thing, if we said, what would you say to people who want to take it away? I mean, the first thing I would say is it's not your right. It's not your place. The Second Amendment doesn't confer that right to me. God or natural law confers that right to me. So I have the right to do it because it's an implement and a tool that I can use to defend myself and my family, and maybe even property, depending on the situation. So it's not for you to come in and to say that, I don't have that right or that you can take it away. The Second Amendment there isn't there to give me that right. It's there to acknowledge that the right exists and that it's not the government or anybody else's place to come in and interfere with it. That's number one, right? But those folks don't care about that. So that's not going to work, but that's where we start from, right? The second thing is about the children, right? That's the first thing that these folks will do, is they always try to couch things in moral terms, and they will couch things in emotional terms to where it's very hard for you to argue with it. Because, I mean, we all care about kids, right? We have kids in our family, we may be parents, or we have nieces and nephews, or, everybody wants to protect kids. but they only want to protect it on things when it interferes with your rights to protect yourself, right? They're not worried about kids that are being sex trafficked in over the border, and things like that. No, those people that come in on that, they don't care about that. They don't care about leaving. I could go down that rabbit hole. So, first of all, recognize what their angle is. It's to grab the moral high ground. And so you can't let them do that, right? You can't fall into that trap. So when they start saying guns are going into places, killing people, killing kids, there's no gun has legs. No gun is walking in and killing anybody. These are people that are using guns to do it. And in countries where they have banned guns or restricted the ownership of them, they either still, you have the black market, right, is available. Criminals still find access. Those countries still have shootings, right? And even if those statistics are lower than what we have here, we've had the criminal element finds a way. They will find a knife. We've had knife attacks in Europe and in Asia that have racked up as many body count as some of the active shooting attacks we've had here. People ramming vehicles into places, and killing people. So, the evil that resides in the human heart will always manifest and find a way to victimize people.
And I think that's the biggest thing that they need to understand, is that it's people, not guns. Go ahead, bro.
Yeah.
Continue on.
Exactly. But they'll say, but we got this problem. And it's like, this problem is relatively recent, right? And in terms of how we understand it now. Yeah, people have been shooting people with guns since several hundred years ago, since they were invented. But I mean, to have the dynamics that we have now with the numbers that we have now, that's a relatively recent development. And you have to ask yourself, well, where did that come from? Because I could tell you where I grew up in the rural South, where kids would take off of school when deer season came, right? And I know there's some places up there in Pennsylvania where they do that too. Mm-hmm. And I could tell you that I went to a school where kids kept their deer rifles out in their trucks. There was, in those pickup trucks back in the old days, there was racks, on the back glass, mm-hmm. and people kept their rifles. You could drive to school and have a loaded gun in your car, and no one would have ever thought to say anything about it. Nobody would have broken into your car to take it. No student would have gotten so mad that they would have run out and grabbed their gun and come back in and shot somebody with it. And there was no teacher, superintendent, or administrative official that was even concerned that would happen. It's because mentally and emotionally and psychologically, we were a healthier society, right, than we are now. So then you start kind of backtracking it and say, well, what's changed in this country? What is different? And you go from there. And if it were me, I think that's what you should address. But see, you don't. But the folks that are onto this, that are wanting to control and restrict, they don't care about that, because those problems that exist, that just exacerbates the problem. It encourages more violence, which then gives them an opportunity to talk about it, because ultimately they want to take it away. There's no other there's no other option. There's no other reason why they would say, because they're not concerned about the safety.
But why do they want to take it? Why do they want to take it away from us? Right? Why would motives matter? Right, Mark? Intentions matter. What's their motive in wanting to take my gun away? What's their motive for you and I, right, as men, to protect mm-hmm. our family? Like, I'm gonna protect my wife, my children, my home at all costs. I don't care. My theory has always been, Mark, if someone comes into my home, and I live in the woods in the middle of nowhere, mm-hmm. someone comes into my home and I hear them and I get my gun and I'll go on record on this. I will, and I feel that my family's, and I want to make sure I'm specific, and I feel that my family's life is threatened. Anyone in my family under my roof is threatened. It's my duty as a man to protect my home. I'm gonna take you down and worry about the consequences later, dude. Right. You're in my home. You threaten my family, my wife, my kids. That's my primary role as a man in my home, to protect them. Why do these people want to take that away from me? And yet the criminals can have the right. Not they don't have the right, but they get the guns illegally anyway.
Yeah.
Right? To come and hurt you and I, law-abiding citizens.
Again, to speculate on why a particular person thinks the way they do, I don't know. But all I can do is look in history, and I look at dictatorships, and that's, what do they do? And that's one of the first things that they do is that they eliminate and restrict the rights of the citizenry to arm themselves. And I would just say, well, why do they do that? Well, the simple reason is so that they can control people, right? I mean, that's all it is, so that they maintain power control. So that's what I see in totalitarian societies. I can't think of another reason or motivation that I've seen, in those societies. So then I guess you just kind of bring it back here, and I guess that's the only thing we're left with. I don't know. I mean, maybe one of these folks that are, that advocate for that kind of position, I'd like to hear their take on it. I'd like to sit down and talk to them about it.
Maybe
we'll have an honest discussion.
Maybe we'll have that podcast. We'll bring you back on and have you on and have one of those folks that believe differently than what you believe, and we can have that discussion here. I want to share something with you. I found some stats on Statista. Let me know if you see my screen. Those that cannot see my screen, I'm sharing with Mark. Those that are just listening, I'm sharing with Mark, and it's here. This is from Statista, Center Fire, shooting sports, right? And where firearm deaths are most prevalent. Countries with the most violent deaths involving a firearm per 100,000 population in 2016. And at the top of the list is El Salvador, right? Murder capital of the world, El Salvador. Venezuela next, Syria, Arab Honduras, St. Kitts and Nevis, Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, Angola, Bahamas, Guatemala, and those are the top 10. The U.S. doesn't even come close. Now, when we look at percentages, El Salvador has 72.5% of firearm deaths are of death. Says countries with the most violent deaths involving firearms per 100,000. So they have 72.5. They have the highest percentage. America, for those that can't see, 3.1%. 3.1%. So what is it that these people that have this argument about taking Americans' guns away off of, taking our guns away from us? Yet the data, this is pure data we're going with now, right? Pure logic, not emotion. We talked about emotion a little while ago because we all love kids and we all want to protect our kids. I think that's our duties, to protect women, children, and seniors. That's just in my alignment of values, right? Yeah. Those are the ones we have to protect. What are your thoughts when you see this? When you see this data?
So yeah, well, you mentioned the disconnect, right? You're like, well, if this is where the action's happening and we're such a small segment, like what's the problem? Why don't we just kind of get on the mental health and the societal, the breakup of the family, addressing the core issues, that are behind that thing. But again, it gets back to what we said earlier, the control, the people that are driving this discussion, and I mean the people at the top, right, that are setting policy, setting the agenda, the topics for discussion, they don't care about that. They don't care about that because that's not what they're trying to get into. They're after the control and the power. But there are people kind of, just like what Stalin would call, the useful idiots, the people that are low IQ, low function, low information people, that are part of the movement, that they propagandize, the people that are ideologically aligned, with that. They probably have no idea. They don't look at those statistics. They probably don't know. But like you said, like with the media, it's all dependent on what you give attention to, right? Like we in this country, right? If the media is talking about something and they're running a spotlight on it, then it changes your perception, right? You think that's what's going on. You think that is that it's a. I'm
It's
kind of blanking
propaganda,
out.
brother. That's propaganda.
Yeah,
It's
I mean,
literally
you
what it is.
begin to think. Well, just like during the, a great example would be like, when I've gone to Europe before and I've talked with people and they're like, oh man, America is like such a dangerous place, man.
I know. I hear the
So
same thing.
dangerous. Like, how would you go? And I was like, what are you talking about, dude? Like, America's one of the safest places. And, even by this, the graphic you just put up,
Mm-hmm.
our gun deaths are a lot less than than many other places. We're very small in terms of gun violence, but they're like, oh, the guns and everybody's got guns and they're shooting people. And I'm like, not where I live, not where I travel. I travel the entire country and I've never run into any of that stuff. I don't see it. It's not, we're not in a war zone. You do have certain pockets, on the East Coast and inner cities where there's gang violence and stuff like that and certain parts of town, but that is very isolated. But the media is just driving it. They're just constantly shining a spotlight on it that, when you're just consuming that and you're not balancing it against other perspectives, then you begin to think that that's reality. Media is very powerful. I mean, they can really set the agenda. You can look at things that are going on, that this country's facing, and they can turn and channel your attention to any direction, to any other topic at will, just by simply ignoring it and putting attention on some other topic. I mean, everybody sees that.
100%, brother. You touched on something a little while ago when we touched on mental health.
Mm-hmm.
There is some issues in America as it pertains to mental health. I have my own perspective on that. I don't want to get into that. But there is some issues on the right people getting their hands on a gun. So I'm a gun owner. I've bought guns.
Mm-hmm.
I've bought guns at gun shows. I bought guns at stores here local. There's a local store here up the street from my office. I got my carrier's permit. My wife has a carrier's permit. And so what I do believe on that side, that we probably should have a better process as it pertains to mental health issues.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on mental health and the wrong people getting their hands on weapons? People with mental health illness. What would you propose if you let's play a game. Let's play legislation. If you were a legislator and you were in power, what recommendation would you implement or would you recommend so that we can manage the mental health issues and gun ownership in America?
Mm-hmm. Well, the first thing is I would need more information. I would need to see some data on, what are the rates for mental health. What was the driver behind it? Were these people, were they diagnosed? Were they receiving treatment? Did they go off their treatment? Did they, stop seeking help? Or were they people that were not diagnosed? And so if the case is you had an illness that was undiagnosed, how did we miss it? How did they go through a school system and, job? Like, how did no one catch that? I would want to know that type of data.
Let me give you a scenario.
Yeah.
Let's say we have someone that's, mental health issues, or schizophrenic, let's say. Okay, that's a serious mental health issues, and those of you that might have that is a serious mental health issue in the medical field. And they have decided that they have known records of having this issue, and that person is now decided for whatever reason to stop taking their medication or whatever that case may be, and they go into store on the corner up the street here from my office to buy a weapon, to buy a gun. Should there be some type of registry when that person goes into that store that checks for mental health of some sort, because that person now could potentially be a threat? Would you think that's a violation of HIPAA laws or someone's health issues? Do you think there should be some guardrails around that? And again, we don't have the data around. I'm a data guy, so I like to see data, but I think that
and
we need some sort of guardrails.
Yeah, and quite frankly, I mean, I know terms and things related to mental health illness, but I'm by no means an expert. And to know, like, how does that work? I mean, I was a prosecutor for 6 years, and was very small part of my job, maybe, less than 5% of my docket was, handling involuntary mental commitments, people who were a danger to themselves and others, who were off of their medication or had never been prescribed medication, that could go through this hearing process to have them involuntarily committed so that they could get diagnosed, get treated, and then as soon as the doctor, which always, in like 99% of the cases, literally, I think I only had in those 6 years maybe one case where someone was kept longer than 45 days, and most of them were less than 30 days, and I'd say at least 90%, 95% were, out within a week, and released. I don't know a whole lot. I would, again, it kind of goes back to the data of, this person, what was the level of schizophrenic? I mean, I just don't know enough about the mental health stuff to advise, but your answer to your question is, should there be guardrails? Yeah, there should be, because, with the founding fathers, when they drafted the Constitution, and, it assumes that you have a healthy citizenry. I think it was even John Adams said that, the way we have this set up, it only works for a moral people. You have to have a sense of morality. You have to understand that, yes, you have freedom, but you are responsible for your decisions. You're responsible for your actions, and you have a duty to live within a society, with, cooperative self-interest, right? I mean, that type of thing. So, that's how this society was constructed, right? So, yeah, when you have a deviation from that, when there's someone who is unhealthy and unable to assume the responsibility for their own actions, of course, there needs to be guardrails. What those are, that's where, unfortunately, in this country, but that's what we really need, are people who are experts from different fields that can come at this, that are really trying to seek a solution and not pursue an agenda, other than the health and safety of all, and respecting the rights of the individual, to keep them safe. Because ultimately, it is the right of the individual and the responsibility of the individual to keep them safe. Right. But that's where people like you and I come down. We just automatically think that it's the individual's ultimate responsibility. You can't outsource it. But you do have other people that think, no, it's not. It's the state. The state has the responsibility to protect you. It's the state that has to come in and, decide how you will be protected. And every time we see that, I mean, it's a disaster.
Ludicrous. It's absolutely ludicrous to expect the state to take care of me and my family. You're gotta be joking.
Yeah, how could somebody 1,000 miles away, trying to handle all of the world's problems, regulate me, like decide down to the level of, how and when, I could do things that are just as a basic human necessary for my survival, and the survival of my family. It's ridiculous, but.
I got a couple questions for you.
Sure.
Morality. You mentioned morality and the founding fathers. Do you think that society still has a sense of morality in 2024?
Well, I think it depends on how you define morality, right? I mean, these are, we have words and we all think that they know what they mean, but sometimes they mean different things to different people. If you're religious, if you're a religious person, and depends on what kind of religion you're into, right? But, if you're a part of one of the mainstream, I hate to use that word, but like one of the larger world religions, then usually when you talk about morality, it's connected to your certain duties that are religious, right? And then those may carry on to you interact with your fellow man, whereas if somebody is not religious, they may still talk about morality, but may be more connected to ethics, and instead of just a good and evil versus, right or wrong or permitted and unpermitted, and things like that. So, I don't, that's the first thing we'd have to do is define what is morality.
I think for the sense of this discussion, let's define morality as the 10 Commandments, right? Like as what the 10 Commandments in the Bible, which I think across most religions, right, and across most human beings, I'm of the belief that most people are good and have good intentions. I think there are bad people, but I think for the most part, people have good intentions, right? Don't kill, don't steal, those basic things. Don't do harm unto others for no reason. Like those basic things. Let's just keep that in context for the sake of morality. Like, don't speak bad about other people without honor your word, right? Now we're going kind of into values, but do you think that as it pertains to, like, if we use that as a baseline, that our society as a whole is losing a sense of morality? Because, like you said, James Adams assumed that this will only work and stated that this will, as you said, this will only work if we have a society that has a sense of morality. Have we lost that in 2024 in the United States of America?
I think based on where I travel and where I go, I mean, I get a pretty good cross section of the country, and I think on the most part, I think when people are going to their 9-to-5 jobs, paying their bills, trying to raise their family and their kids, I think for the most part, yes. I think the problem comes into is, where is that morality grounded and defined? And that kind of gets into your values and principles, because, when you have certain pressures, certain crises that happen in society, then it starts bringing out things in people, maybe things that people didn't know was there. And so I just kind of go back to the lockdowns. Some of the things that was being said, neighbor to neighbor, was incredible. You had, with people that didn't want to take the jab, and literally I saw people, I can't think of specifics of names of people, but I mean, I do remember seeing things, certain politicians or people that were posting things, taking the position of, well, if they didn't get vaccinated, then, you should refuse them medical care if they get sick,
Ridiculous.
Things like that.
We see how that turned out.
Man. Yeah. I mean, and it's like, that's amazing, and all of the hysteria that was really driven by talking heads and media and people not really educating themselves. And, I remember driving in my truck, just running errands and stuff, at the height of all this. Where I live, we were semi-restricted, but not near as what other states were. But I'm driving down, and I mean, on the hour or every half hour, we had posted statistics. How many people were in the hospital?
Yep.
How many deaths have we had? How many, what the current state of the hospitals are. But what metric they never reported were how many people were recovering. Now, that's a pretty important metric, right? Because and I'm just pulling a statistic out, but this is man-made. I don't know what the statistic was, but I know the overwhelming amount of people recovered from it. And so if you have a metric of, a 90% recovery rate versus mortality rate, well, I mean, wouldn't you want to know that? Don't you think that's important? Wouldn't that change the maybe some decisions that you were making, or at least influence certain decisions on, whether I decided to wear a mask or whether I decided to go out into public or engage with certain people or go certain places? Don't you think that metric is pretty dang important? But they never mentioned that.
Why do you think the media didn't tell that? You see, you're a thinking man, right? That's the mark of a thinking human being, a logical thinking human being that asks questions, curious. Is like, wait a minute, why are you not telling me this? Why do you think the media wasn't pushing that narrative? Because I would think as a leader, right? I'm going to push the narrative of the upside. I want to give both sides so that we can make informed decisions, right?
Yeah.
Why do you think the media and even the government at the time wasn't pushing this narrative? Wasn't pushing that side and giving us the full picture, but giving us only a narrow view of what's bad.
So if I talk, I mean, again, you're speculating and trying to get into some people's heads, but I think at least answering the media question, I think it's very simple. I don't necessarily think it's an evil, nefarious, or diabolical kind of thing, although probably immoral, but in a sense, but I think it just comes down to economics. I mean, I think people, most people are still under the misconception that the media is out there to inform you about the truth. And that's not the case. They are a business they're not a nonprofit entity. They are a business designed to make a profit. They have to have sponsors, right? They have to run ads, and no one is going to run ads if there's no listenership or no viewership. And we know just through psychology that the best way to ramp people up is to get them scared, to get them fearful. I mean, that's what gets them paying attention, right? So you have to generate this hysteria to keep people clicking on the post, to keep people tuning in to see what the latest results, to get the people searching, online and hitting those ads so that when they bring up that website, there's the ad space, there's the ad that pops up that you see. And if you tell people, hey, listen, if you're healthy, if you have a healthy lifestyle, if you're taking care of yourself, chances are, you probably are going to get this, but you're probably going to recover, and it's just going to be a terrible case of the flu. Yes, there are some anomalies of healthy people who've got it and died, but that is a very low percentage of the rate. Most of the people that are dying off are people who have, elderly. And again, I'm not a medical person, but just kind of what I saw when I looked at the stats, it seemed like if you were elderly or if you had comorbidity, you had other things, enlarged hearts or, other type of health issues, that you were at the greatest risk. And so you needed to take the greatest precautions, or with children, things like that. People probably wouldn't turn in. They'd be like, oh, okay, well, I don't fit that category. So, I'm not going to tune in and be hyped up and kind of get addicted to that, to the news feed, to the news cycle, right?
Got it.
I mean, I always thought this would be interesting. I mean, what if, and I would guarantee you, I firmly believe this in my heart, that if the media ran statistics of people who died in car crashes every half hour, if they told you on the national statistics of how many people were getting involved in auto accidents and car crashes and dying from that, I could guarantee you there would be more stricter regulations on the road, on travel, and on vehicles. Guarantee it, because it would be top of mind, and everybody thinks, oh man, people would probably be afraid to drive their own cars. People would probably there would probably be greater calls for more public transit, like there is in Europe in larger cities and things like that. Guarantee you. Why? Because they would be shining a spotlight. And if that's all you see, then you begin to think that is reality.
Yeah. Where your focus goes, energy flows, and
exactly.
So where your focus goes, it grows, right? It's just the way we are. Last final question for you, my friend, as it pertains to gun control. How do you think we can improve the public education on gun safety and regulations?
Well, you have national policy, you have state and local policy, and then you have, your own day-to-day of things that you approach and you can affect. Like, there's very little I can do to shift national policy, maybe a little bit more on state and local, but still little. But, the things that I can do as a person is have honest, meaningful conversations with people, not trying to win an argument. That's the problem. I think a lot where we are in society, we're so segmented now that we only want to talk to people who agree with us. We only want to watch things and opinions that agree with us, that bolster our sense of self and our ego. And if someone doesn't agree with it, now all of a sudden through media, social media, through our feeds, we can block those voices out. And so the more you block that out, the more wider the disparity, between the beliefs or our ability to even communicate with one another, right? So what I try to do when I come into contact with people that don't agree with me, I just try to have a conversation. I'm not bent on trying to change their mind. I'm not going to change their mind. Like if you are, if that certain type of ideology is ingrained in your mind, your mindset, I'm not going to change your mind in a 5, 10-minute or 30-minute conversation, right? But I can maybe plant a seed. Maybe I have an interaction where you're like, oh, wait, maybe they're not all rabid, violent people. Maybe they're, maybe this is a sensible, responsible human being. Maybe not all gun owners are evil and wicked and just want kids to die in the streets. Maybe, and then maybe they have a conversation with you and they see the same thing, right? And you can change that. I mean, every one of us can do that at a minimum. Every one of us can do that. But getting into Twitter fights with people or on Facebook or, posting memes and, calling people names just because they don't agree with you, regardless, and it goes on both sides. I mean, that doesn't help anybody. All that does is reinforce the folks that are already on your side of the aisle, so to say. So you didn't get anything done there, and it just further alienates those that disagree with you. So nothing's gotten done at all, if you interact with people that way. But if you just try to interact with someone as a human being, as a fellow human person, respecting their opinion and trying to figure out, well, why do you think that way? That's really interesting. Why do you think that? I never thought of that. I mean, even if you don't agree with them, you might learn something just from having an honest discussion and just trying to find out what they think and talk about it and not necessarily trying to change a person and force them to your way of thinking. It may sound counterintuitive, but I mean, I think that's one thing. The other thing is making sure that we're raising the next generation to appreciate freedoms, getting them involved in shooting sports. I mean, back in the day, you can see, pictures from the 50s and stuff. There were some schools that had shooting programs in the school, and maybe they were shooting BB guns, but that's fine, right? I mean, the fundamentals are the same. You're teaching them an appreciation for shooting, and you're teaching them responsible gun handling, those types of things, and you're putting that into the culture, right? I think it gets harder, I think then you say, well, what changed? Well, there's a lot of change. It's not just one thing that changed, but I think one thing that impacts it negatively is we are more urbanized now than we were 100 years ago, 50 years ago. And the more urban you get, right, you don't have as much access and ability to exercise, to go out and shoot. And so your culture tends to drift away from that. Where I grew up, like I said, I grew up in rural South. Everybody had land. If I wanted to go shoot, I just go out in my backyard and I could shoot. And as we become more and more urbanized, that ability goes away. And it's just like anything. If you don't use it, if you don't engage in it, then it becomes less important to you, and then it finally vanishes. So
you said something key a moment ago, which is like getting our youth involved in this stuff. And I grew up in New York City, Mark, and guns are a big deal in New York. You got caught with a gun in New York City, shit, you're doing time. Back in the 90s, you're doing time. And for every bullet, there's more time. And it was like, you saw a gun, right? Me growing up in New York City, see a gun. It's like, whoa, get away from me. I don't want nothing to do with that. Like, it's a fear of the law, right? And I would hear all these stories about these shootings with kids that took a gun to school or took mom or dad's gun. And you hear these things. And I remember when I moved to Pennsylvania, my kids were small. I raised all of my kids here. And one of the things that I did, the first thing I did when I bought my first gun was took all the kids. They were little. I mean, my youngest was like 5. Put them around the table. I said, this is a gun. Here. This is how, I took out bullets. I said, here, touch it. Let's get the curiosity out. This is what it is, right? This is how it's handled. This is what it's for. And I made it normal for them, because the last thing I wanted was they go to a friend's house or something and they're curious. Now they see guns when they come. Now they're adults. They see guns and they come to the house, and we keep, my oldest comes home and he puts his gun on top of the kitchen table. It's normal for us, right? Like, it's just normal for us. And they see guns, but we took out that curiosity, to your point of training our kids. We go to shooting ranges together as a family too.
Yeah.
Backyard. We shoot in our backyard because we got 4 acres. And so it's just getting that out of them, giving them that education. Hey, this is a weapon. You treat it with respect. It's not a toy. This is how you handle it. This is what you do, and this is how you conduct yourself with it. I think we need to be doing more of that, to your point.
Same. So I've got a similar story. I mean, me growing up, that's what my dad did with me at a very young age. He brought it out. I knew where all the guns in our house were, and they were not secure. Right now, this is back in the 80s, a long time ago. And I'm not advocating that someone do that. I'm not saying that was the right thing. I'm just saying, in the day and age where we lived back then, that's what happened in my house. But I never once thought, my dad, when I was a kid, he's like, if you ever want to see one, if you want to take it out, come to me and we will. And every once in a while I'd go up and I'd say, hey, Daddy, I want to see that one gun, that one pistol or the shotgun or whatever. He would stop what he was doing. He would never say, okay, we'll do it in a second. He would literally, if he was in the middle of something, he would stop right there. He would take it out, make sure it was unloaded, hand it to me. And then we would talk about it, or I'd see it or manipulate it, whatever, re-emphasizing the safety things. And then I would give it back. I never once thought, because I also knew if I went and grabbed one, if I went... he was going to wear me out with the belt. You know what I mean? I knew he was going to do that. So never once did I, because there was no curiosity, it was dispelled. The mystique behind it was dispelled.
Correct.
Because I knew anytime I wanted to, it was there. It was available to me. So it wasn't anything like that. So I've done that with my kids. We don't have any issues. And yeah, I think, but that's the key there. I grew up in a home that was very disciplined. I was very respectful of my parents, particularly my dad. And, I knew what the ground rules and I knew what the consequences were if I violated those. And so, Mark, he did it right, in my opinion.
Thank you, brother, so much for coming on. Really, really appreciate it, man. I really, really am grateful for you coming on, sharing your wisdom, your insights with me and my audience. If people wanted to connect with you, Mark, how do they get a hold of you? Where can they connect with you? How do they find you? I know you're doing trainings and you're doing a bunch of different things. Tell us about that. How can people find you?
The best place to go is to go to the website, and it's barritusdefense.com, BARRITUS defense.com. If you go there and sign up for our free newsletter, I'd like to say once a week you'll hear from us, but it's probably more like 2-3 times a month. I usually send some kind of, that's where you're going to get updates on where we're training. If you want to come out and train with us, what types of courses we're going to do. You'll get announcements on when new podcasts drop. So PearlSnap Tactical, we're on Apple, Spotify, anywhere you go to listen to your podcasts. Yeah, you'll always be updated there. And then you'll get access to, or you can get access to online courses and training that we do as well. So that's probably the best place to find us. We're on the social medias and stuff like that. But again, if you go to the website, sign up for the newsletter, you're gonna get all that.
Thank you, brother. Really appreciate you. I want to thank the listeners for coming on and truly discovering what it truly means to be wealthy AF.